Welcome, good morning. My name is Greg Stafford. We meet at 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time every weekday to consider a portion of the biblical record or wise sayings from history or other information that we can use to take with us during the day, benefit from, and help others where we can. We're working our way through the New Testament letters. We started these broadcasts in the letter to the Philippians, congregation in ancient Philippi. And now we're reading the letter that was written to the ancient congregation in Colossae, known as Colossians. We're reading from chapter 2, verses 20 through 23 today. And I'll go ahead and start today's text so we can make an application and be on our way. Starting in verse 20, Paul writes, "If you died with Christ away from the basic principles of the world, why are you being forced to obey these rules?" And then he lists the rules in verse 21. Do not set out to do this. Do not enjoy that. Do not embrace this, or do not touch this. And then in verse 22, he explains, these things are all set to perish, as they are used up according to the commands and teachings of human beings. Such things are a message indeed. On the one hand, they show wisdom when it comes to how each person decides to worship, and a certain humility, namely a suffering of the body, if you withhold from yourself things that you might otherwise desire. And then he concludes in verse 23, yet this has no value when it comes to managing the flesh. So in other words, there are things that people may choose not to do. Don't do this, don't do that. And there are things that are good not to do, that are actually harmful to you and to other people. But Paul is talking about here how oftentimes Christians and others make up all these rules. We can't do this, we can't do that. That is not Christianity. That doesn't mean that everything is open and free to do without consequence. That's not the point either. The point of both Paul or any other biblical writer who writes about things like this, you could go back to Solomon even. What did he say? Know this. Everything your hand finds to do, do with your very power. He says this in Ecclesiastes chapter 12. For there is no wisdom, no knowledge, nor understanding in Sheol, or Hades, the grave. But then he concludes and says, but know this, every single thing we do will be brought before Jah, and he will give us an accounting. Now, Jah is a loving father, so we should not think of Jah as this terrible judge. You should think of him as someone, the most loving and understanding person who exists, and who does hold people accountable just like a real father. Right? A real father loves his children and takes care of them, helps them to grow, but he doesn't let them do anything, right? Because then the child who doesn't really know what's good or bad yet will make a decision based on that lack of knowledge and hurt themselves. So the goal of a father and a mother, but I'm speaking from a father's perspective, is to help your children be prepared to decide what to do, what to enjoy, what to touch, what to embrace. We can't make those decisions for them forever. And if we try to, you'll likely cause them to do the opposite or resent the good advice that you're trying to give them if you push too hard. And so it's the same way with Christians or other people who aren't Christians but who may be God-fearing on some level. It's not going to be beneficial for us to try to force them to do something just because we don't do it or think it's good to do. It may not be something we really have any basis for telling someone else not to do because it's something Jah allows each person to decide and then stand before him and his son in judgment. And so it's very difficult when we try to get involved in other people's lives. It can be very difficult for us to do it correctly. So the best thing we can do is to set a good example. And because we're imperfect and fail as well, we can still try to help people appreciate the things we're supposed to do and point out that we all make mistakes. So try not to make it more difficult on people. It's not necessary to create all these rules and regulations in order for others to be acceptable to us. The question is, are they acceptable to Jah? Are they doing things that show that they have love for other people? And if they are, is it really necessary for us to add further burden to them? Remember what the apostles said in the book of Acts, chapters 15 and 21, I believe, where they were talking about some of the things that they were dealing with, having to do primarily with the Mosaic law and what commands they should do. And because Moses was being read every week or more often, and they were hearing these commands, do not do this, do not do that. And so then they wrote back and said, we have favored adding no further burden to you, we in the Holy Spirit, except these necessary things. And then he talks about a few of them, such as not eating blood and things of that sort, which is very bad for you, by the way. And the people who try to obtain value through eating blood are in for a big surprise. But that's their choice, right? We cannot force people to do what we want them to do. We simply provide the best reasons we have for our faith, the things that we have confidence in, and we help wherever we can. But each person must make a decision on what they're going to do. And then that person will be responsible for the consequences which follow. So keep these things in mind. Try to focus on the more important things, which are praising Jah, helping others to recognize Jesus as the Messiah, and then treating others the way you want to be treated. You wouldn't want somebody telling you what you should do all the time, would you? But you probably would want someone to encourage you all the time, someone to show love and to be supportive. That's okay, right? There's no limit on that, unless you get too invasive. But otherwise, you see, those things, there's no law against doing what is good, like the Bible elsewhere teaches. You can do as much good as you want, and it's almost never going to be too much. Again, unless you become invasive in some way. But when it comes to telling people what to do, and that's easy. That's the easy way out, because then we're basically using other people to make ourselves feel better about the things that we believe are right. So try to find the people who are going to be working with you, who will be loving, and who aren't going to put all these different rules and regulations on you. It's one thing to see someone having a problem and they're hurting themselves and others and wanting to help. That's okay. But they still have to help themselves, ultimately. But try not to make it more difficult than the world and we ourselves already make it. Serving Jah and Jesus is actually very simple. That's why we just have three things. We don't believe it's really more necessary for more than that. There is a lot more, of course. But how much do you want to focus on? How much can you focus on and truly be effective? I hope you enjoyed today's text. I did, and I always do enjoy these things with you. So thank you all for joining me this morning. I will be back tomorrow for another day text at 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time as we work our way through Colossians and on to the next New Testament document. So may Jah bless you. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow.